The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft orange glow over the peaceful city of New Haven on Earth. Ilara stood by the window of her small apartment, watching the world move slowly below. She was just a normal young girl, living a simple life among the bustling streets of humanity's last great city. She didn't know that this peaceful moment would be her last. Ilara had always dreamt of the stars, fascinated by the vast unknown. As a child, she would stare up at the night sky, wondering if there were other civilizations out there, watching her, just as she watched them. But little did she know, the stars weren't just distant, silent witnesses. They were about to come crashing down on her. The Galactic Empire, a ruthless alien force that had dominated countless worlds, had set its sights on Earth. The humans had always been a small, insignificant species in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but Earth had never been an easy target. Humans were fierce, resilient, and stubborn. They had fought off countless invaders before, but this time, the Empire's fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The first signs of the invasion came late one evening, when the sky above New Haven erupted with flashes of light. At first, people thought it was a meteor shower, a beautiful but harmless display. But then the ground shook. Buildings trembled, and the air was filled with a strange hum. People rushed into the streets, looking up in panic as massive ships descended from the heavens. The Galactic Empire's warships, enormous and terrifying, blotted out the stars as they took positions above Earth's atmosphere. The city's defenses activated in a flash, firing anti-aircraft missiles into the sky. But it was hopeless. The Empire's technology was far superior to anything humanity had. Their weapons were designed to destroy entire fleets, not just missiles. One by one, the defense systems fell silent, swallowed by the overwhelming power of the alien assault. Ilara's heart raced as she heard the sirens wail in the distance. She grabbed her belongings in a hurry, her mind racing with fear, but there was nowhere to hide. The Empire had come, and their forces were too powerful. She made her way to the street, where people were running in every direction, searching for safety. It was chaos. Then, from the skies above, a massive, ominous shadow loomed. A gigantic alien ship descended slowly, casting a dark shadow over the city. It wasn't like the others. This ship was a symbol of destruction, a weapon of unimaginable power. The Empire's command ship had arrived. As the giant warship touched down in the city, a wave of fear washed over everyone. It was like the end of the world had arrived. People screamed in terror, but no one knew where to run. The Empire's soldiers, tall and fearsome, emerged from the ship in rows. They wore dark, imposing armor and carried weapons that seemed to hum with deadly energy. Ilara froze, standing still amidst the chaos. Her mind couldn't comprehend what was happening. She had always imagined the universe as vast and beautiful, full of wonder, but this was something else entirely. The invaders weren't here to make peace. They were here to destroy. The soldiers moved through the streets, capturing people at random. Ilara watched as they grabbed her friends and neighbors, forcing them into the dark, cold transports. There was no time to fight back, no time to think. Everything was happening too fast. Her body trembled as she realized that she was one of the chosen few. She had been selected to be taken. Before she could run, a strong hand gripped her arm. The soldier, cold and indifferent, pulled her towards the transport. Ilara struggled, but it was no use. The strength of the alien soldier was beyond anything she could have imagined. She was dragged through the streets, helpless and powerless. Inside the transport, Ilara looked around. The others were all afraid, just like her. They had been taken from their homes, ripped away from everything they knew. Some cried, some were silent, but all shared the same terror in their eyes. The journey to the Empire's capital was long and brutal, but Ilara's mind was clouded with fear and confusion. She didn't understand why this was happening. What had Earth done to deserve this? Days passed as the transport flew through the dark void of space. Ilara barely ate or slept. The only thing that kept her going was the thought of her family, her friends. She wondered if they had survived, if anyone was left to fight back. But she knew deep down that the war was already lost. The Empire was too powerful. There was no hope. Finally, the transport landed at a massive space station, one that stretched out in all directions. It was the heart of the Empire, a place where prisoners were brought to be held, to be forgotten. Ilara was escorted to a holding cell, a small cold room with nothing but a metal bench and a flickering light above. It was there, in that dark corner of the galaxy, that Ilara's life came to an end. No one knew the full extent of what happened that day. No one knew the cruelty of the Empire's actions, but one thing was clear: Earth had lost something precious. Ilara's death was not just the loss of a single life. It was the loss of innocence. It was a declaration of war against humanity. The Galactic Empire had crossed a line, and they would soon learn that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The murder of one girl, one innocent soul, had ignited a fire within the hearts of every human on Earth. As her death spread across the galaxy, it sparked outrage. It ignited a war that would never be forgotten. The time for peace was over. The time for revenge had begun. Suspense hook. As the tragedy of Ilara's death spreads through Earth, something is stirring within humanity. The Empire has made a terrible mistake, and soon they will realize that they've awakened a sleeping giant. The darkness of space stretched endlessly in every direction as the Star Destroyer prepared for launch. Earth's last hope, a vessel of unmatched power, sat quietly at a secret military base on the moon, a symbol of humanity's resilience. The ship's sleek metallic surface gleamed under the dim light of the base, its engines humming with the promise of vengeance. For weeks, Earth's top military leaders and engineers had worked tirelessly on this final weapon, a ship designed not just for combat, but for retribution. The world had mourned the loss of Ilara, but now it was time to turn grief into action. The people of Earth had endured far too many tragedies at the hands of the Galactic Empire, and they would no longer remain silent. Inside the command room of the Star Destroyer, Commander Lucas Gray stood before the massive holographic map of the galaxy. His face was grim, eyes focused on the movements of the Imperial fleet. The map flickered, showing red blips, signals of an approaching threat. The Empire had spread across the galaxy like a plague, and it was time for humanity to send a message. "Commander," a voice broke the silence, drawing Gray's attention to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kara Miller. "All systems are ready for launch. The crew is awaiting orders." Gray nodded, but his thoughts were far away, still haunted by the image of Ilara, the young girl whose life had been stolen by the Empire. He had never met her, but her face, broadcasted across every screen on Earth, had become a symbol. She represented every human who had ever suffered under the Empire's cruelty. Her death was no longer just a tragedy. It was the spark that ignited a flame of vengeance within every person on Earth. "Initiate launch sequence," Gray ordered, his voice cold and unwavering. "And prepare the fleet." Across the base, the Star Destroyer began to come to life. The engines roared as they powered up, sending a vibration through the floor. Outside, a wave of energy rippled through the air as the colossal ship lifted off, piercing the atmosphere like a spear. The sky above Earth grew dark as the ship ascended, leaving the planet behind and entering the cold expanse of space. The crew aboard the Star Destroyer was unlike any other. Each person aboard was handpicked not just for their skill, but for their unyielding determination. Humans were often underestimated by the galaxy's more advanced races, but this crew embodied the spirit of humanity. Tough, resourceful, and relentless. Lieutenant Kara Miller moved through the corridors of the ship, her steps purposeful. She had been in the military long enough to know the weight of this mission. She had seen the devastation the Empire had caused, and now she had a chance to make them pay. But there was something else that weighed heavily on her mind: the consequences of their actions. The Empire was vast, and they weren't the only force in the galaxy. The rebels, who had secretly allied with Earth, had provided vital information, but it was clear the mission to destroy the Empire's central leadership was a dangerous one. She paused in front of a window, looking out at the void of space. The silence was eerie, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. But it wasn't the silence that worried her. It was the uncertainty. No one knew for sure how the Empire would retaliate, or if Earth could even stand a chance against their superior forces. "Are we ready for this?" she whispered to herself, gripping the edge of the window frame. Back in the command center, Commander Gray watched the stars stretch before them. They were heading toward the heart of the Empire's territory, the place where Ilara had been taken, where her life had ended. The destination wasn't just a military objective. It was a symbol of everything the Empire had done to humanity. "I want all systems at full power," Gray ordered. "We cannot afford any mistakes. This is not just a military mission. This is our statement to the galaxy." The ship's AI system, which had been programmed to analyze enemy forces and adapt to combat scenarios, hummed as it calculated the best approach. Its voice echoed through the command center. "Approaching Empire-controlled space. Enemy ships detected. Estimated fleet strength. Significant. All hands, prepare for battle," Gray commanded. Suddenly, the ship jolted as the engines engaged their faster-than-light travel, hurtling the crew through space at impossible speeds. They were on their way to the heart of the Empire, and nothing was going to stop them. As they traveled through the vast, empty void of space, the crew gathered in the briefing room. Gray stood before them, eyes burning with the fire of vengeance. He could see the same determination in every face. Every one of them had lost something to the Empire, whether it was a family member, a friend, or simply the hope that humanity could ever stand up to these invaders. "We've all lost something," Gray said, his voice low but firm. But Ilara's death, it was the last straw. It wasn't just the death of one person. It was the death of all our hopes for peace. But we're not here for peace anymore. We're here for justice. The crew's response was immediate. Some nodded, some clenched their fists. There was no room for doubt here. This mission wasn't about saving the galaxy. It was about revenge, about showing the Empire that humanity would no longer be crushed beneath their boot. As the Star Destroyer cut through the stars, the crew knew one thing for sure. They were ready for whatever the Empire would throw at them. Earth was no longer the helpless species it had once been. They had a weapon, a ship, and a mission that would change the galaxy forever. The first battle was coming, and Earth would not go down without a fight. Suspense hook, with the Empire's fleet closing in and Earth's final weapon now in motion. Can humanity really defeat the seemingly unstoppable force of the Galactic Empire? The stage is set, and the first battle is about to begin. The vast emptiness of space was pierced by the hum of the Star Destroyer's engines as it cut through the galaxy, now just a speck in the map of the stars. Commander Gray stood at the front of the command center, his face grim, eyes fixed on the blinking radar screen. The data showed a clear path ahead, directly into the heart of the Empire's territory. But the threat was undeniable. The Galactic Empire wasn't going to let this ship, or the humans aboard, get to their heartland without retaliation. "Alert status." "Red," said the AI system, its voice tinged with a hint of urgency. "Empire fleet detected. 200 clicks away. Large number of warships incoming." Gray's jaw tightened. He knew the Empire would not just let them waltz into their domain. Earth's final weapon, the Star Destroyer, had arrived at the brink of battle, but the fight was far from guaranteed. "Battle stations," Gray shouted. The crew sprang into action, moving quickly to their positions. Their resolve was unshakable, even as the terrifying reality of what lay ahead set in. Lieutenant Kara Miller, who had been watching the screens intently, turned to the commander. "The fleet is massive, sir," she said. "Their flagship is a monstrous ship. If we don't neutralize it fast, we'll be outnumbered and outgunned." Gray nodded grimly. He had expected nothing less. The Empire was ruthless in its defense of its territory. and now it was their turn to feel the wrath of humanity. "Prepare all weapons," Gray ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "We fight to win." As the Star Destroyer cruised closer to the Empire's fleet, the vastness of the battle ahead became clear. Hundreds of enemy warships loomed in the distance, like predators waiting for their prey to fall into their grasp. The stars glittered in the distance, giving no sign of the destruction about to unfold. The crew had a single goal now: to destroy the Empire's command center and avenge Ulara's death. Launching attack mode, the AI chimed in, confirming the command to engage. The Star Destroyer's powerful cannons charged with a deep, reverberating hum, the energy surging through its frame. Kara glanced at the view screens, her knuckles white, as she gripped the console. The enemy fleet was closing in rapidly. "Firing on the lead ships," Kara called out. The mighty roar of the ship's weapons shook the hull as a series of heavy blasts shot into the vastness of space, illuminating the dark void with flashes of brilliant white and red. Explosions rocked the first wave of Imperial ships, sending them spiraling in all directions. For a moment, it seemed like victory might be within their grasp, but the reality was far more brutal. The Empire's ships retaliated with devastating force. Their weapons were faster, more precise, and more powerful. The battle raged in an instant, a frenzy of laser beams and explosions, every shot a gamble, every move a risk. The Star Destroyer's shields held strong for the moment, but it was clear that they were outgunned. Every time a shot hit, the crew felt the impact reverberate through the ship like a punch to the gut. "Commander, their flagship is firing," Lieutenant Miller reported, her voice tense. "We need to take it down before it launches its full offensive." Gray didn't hesitate. The flagship of the Galactic Empire was a towering fortress of death, its surface lined with weapons capable of wiping out entire fleets in seconds. If they didn't destroy it quickly, the Star Destroyer and its crew would be overwhelmed. "Full speed ahead," Gray ordered, his eyes narrowing as he watched the Imperial flagship on the display. "Focus all fire on the flagship. I want that ship disabled. Now." With a shuddering roar, the Star Destroyer surged forward, cannons blasting once again. The massive ship darted toward the heart of the Empire's formation, dodging the incoming fire with expert maneuvering. The crew worked in perfect unison, responding to every shift in the battle. The air was thick with tension, their hearts pounding in anticipation of the next blast, the next move. The first hit struck the flagship's outer hull, sending ripples through its massive form. Another hit, and a gaping hole appeared in its side. The crew cheered, but there was no time to celebrate. This was just the beginning. "Keep up the pressure," Gray commanded. "We cannot let up." The Empire was not so easily defeated. Its ships retaliated in force, unleashing devastating barrages of their own. The Star Destroyer's shields began to flicker under the intensity of the fire, but it was still holding. Kara's eyes were locked on the view screen as she fired another round of shots at the flagship. "This is it," Kara said, her voice a whisper of hope and determination. "One more hit and we'll have them." And then, with a deafening explosion, the flagship's core exploded. The shockwave sent out ripples that rocked both sides of the battle, disintegrating nearby ships. It was the turning point. The Empire's forces faltered, the loss of their flagship a blow they could not recover from. The remaining warships hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The balance of power had shifted in an instant. Gray stood tall, feeling the weight of the battle lift slightly from his shoulders. They weren't out of the fight yet, but this victory had given them a fighting chance. "Victory is within reach," Gray said. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of. But we're not finished. We're taking the fight to the heart of the Empire. Prepare for the next phase of the mission." As the remaining Imperial ships retreated into the void of space, the Star Destroyer took its position, heading toward the Empire's capital with renewed determination. The battle was far from over, but the message had been sent loud and clear. Earth was no longer afraid. Earth was no longer weak. The fight for survival had become a fight for victory. Suspense hook. The first battle was won, but the war is far from over. The Galactic Empire's forces may have faltered, but their true strength lies ahead. Will Earth's final weapon be enough to overcome the Empire's full might? The battle erupted in a storm of light and energy, with explosions rippling through space. The Star Destroyer fired its massive weapons, tearing through the advancing Imperial fleet. But the Empire's reinforcements were far more coordinated than the first wave. Their precision and advanced technology made every attack a deadly exchange. Gray's eyes narrowed as the first of the Imperial ships fell. But then, another wave of fire surged toward them. The shields on the Star Destroyer flickered, nearly failing under the pressure. The ship shuddered, but it held strong. The crew braced themselves as the fight escalated to an unimaginable intensity. "Hold your ground," Gray shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not backing down. This is our moment." The battle was reaching its climax. The crew of the Star Destroyer had one chance to take down the Empire's reinforcements. They had to succeed. For Ilara, for Earth, for all of humanity. Suspense hook. With Earth's final weapon in the thick of battle, will they be able to overcome the Empire's overwhelming forces, or will humanity's final stand end in defeat? The fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance. The smoke and fire of the destroyed flagship lingered in the void of space, its wreckage drifting slowly toward the edge of the system. But the victory felt fleeting. The destruction of the Empire's command ship had caused a ripple of chaos, but Gray knew better than to think it was enough to stop them. The Empire was too powerful, too vast to be destroyed in a single blow. "Commander," Kara Miller's voice cut through his thoughts. "The fleet's pulling back, but it's not over. They're regrouping on the far side of the system, setting up defensive formations. We need to move now if we're going to keep the momentum." Gray stood still, his eyes focused on the view screen. The Empire was indeed regrouping, but their retreat wasn't out of fear. It was tactical. They were preparing for their final push. If humanity didn't act fast, the window of opportunity would close. It was a dangerous game they were playing. One misstep, and Earth's chance to strike would be lost. "They're setting up a trap," Gray said under his breath, knowing that the Empire would never give up without a fight. The destruction of their flagship had shaken them, but it hadn't broken their resolve. If anything, they would be more determined to crush Earth for the humiliation. "Sir," Kara continued, "we've received intel from the rest of our fleet. There's a weakness in their defenses, a gap in their formation, but we have to take it before they can recover." Gray turned, his mind working furiously. A weakness, a gap. It was the opening they needed, the one chance they had to deal a decisive blow to the Empire. But taking it would mean putting everything on the line. The Star Destroyer could take a few more hits, but its shields were weakened, its weapons drained. They couldn't afford another prolonged battle. "Full speed ahead," Gray ordered, his voice firm. "Target that gap. We're going to hit them hard and fast. This ends now." The Star Destroyer surged forward, cutting through space toward the enemy's defensive formation. The crew held their breath, knowing that everything they had fought for had led to this moment. Humanity's entire future rested on the outcome of this battle. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for justice, for their fallen comrades, for Earth, and for the future of all who called the galaxy home. As they neared the gap in the enemy's formation, Gray could feel the tension in the air, as if the entire ship was holding its breath. The enemy fleet was massive, their ships gliding through space like a wall of steel. But within that wall, there was an opening, a vulnerability they could exploit. "On my mark," Gray commanded, his voice unwavering. "Prepare to fire everything we have." The crew of the Star Destroyer moved with precision. The air was electric with the weight of their mission. They had to act fast, or the Empire would close the gap before they could strike. Gray's fingers tightened around the armrest of his command chair as he watched the Imperial ships moving into position. They were getting closer. Time was running out. "Mark!" Gray shouted. In an instant, the Star Destroyer unleashed its full firepower. The massive guns roared to life, sending a barrage of energy beams straight toward the gap in the Empire's formation. The force of the attack rippled through space, tearing apart the first wave of Imperial ships. The Star Destroyer rocked with the impact, but it held firm. "Direct hit," Kara called out, her voice triumphant. "We've breached their defenses. The gap is ours." But the Empire wasn't done yet. They had been caught off guard, but they weren't finished. Their remaining warships surged forward, charging toward the Star Destroyer with renewed fury. The gap had been breached, but the price of entry was steep. The Star Destroyer was now in the heart of the Empire's defenses, surrounded on all sides by the enemy's remaining forces. Gray's pulse quickened. This was it. There would be no second chance. They had opened the door, but the battle ahead would be fierce. If they didn't take advantage of this opening, the Empire would crush them. "We're not out of the woods yet," Gray shouted. "Engage with everything we have. Full power to the weapons, full power to the shields." The Star Destroyer's guns fired relentlessly, targeting the closest Imperial ships. The surrounding space exploded with the force of dozens of energy blasts, each one tearing through enemy ships. But the Imperial fleet was relentless. They surrounded the Star Destroyer, hammering it from all sides with blistering fire. "Shields at 30%. The tactical officer shouted, panic rising in their voice. Gray gritted his teeth. He had been in tight situations before, but nothing like this. The Star Destroyer was strong, but it was running out of time. They needed to finish this battle before the Empire could regroup. "Hold the line," Gray said through clenched teeth. "We finished this here. Star Destroyer, fire everything we've got." With a deafening roar, the Star Destroyer unleashed its final barrage. The massive cannon sent a wave of energy crashing through the heart of the Imperial fleet. One by one, enemy ships exploded in a dazzling display of destruction. The flagship had been destroyed, but now it was the turn of the rest of the fleet to fall. And fall they did. One final blast from the Star Destroyer tore through the last of the enemy ships, sending shockwaves rippling through space. For a moment, the battlefield was silent. The Empire had been broken. The battle was over. Gray allowed himself a brief moment of relief before he turned to his crew. They had done it. They had won. The cost had been great, but humanity had proven itself. Earth had struck back, and the Empire's might had been shattered. But this victory wasn't just for them. It was for everyone. For Ilara. For every fallen soldier. For Earth's future. "We've done it," Kara whispered, almost in disbelief. Gray nodded, his eyes still fixed on the view screen. "This is just the beginning. The Empire will remember this day, and they will never underestimate humanity again." The crew of the Star Destroyer stood in awe of their victory, but the war was far from over. The battle had been won, but the true cost of this war, of humanity's fight for survival, was yet to be fully understood. Suspense hook. The Empire is in disarray, but the galaxy's war is far from over. Earth has proven its might, but the full weight of the Empire's revenge is still to come. Can humanity withstand the consequences of this victory, or will the Empire's wrath destroy everything they've worked for? The silence of space was oppressive. The Star Destroyer had completed its mission, and the battle was won. But as Gray stood on the command deck, the tension was far from gone. Victory, while sweet, had only begun to reveal the consequences. Despite the monumental destruction of the Imperial fleet, Earth's victory had ignited the wrath of the Empire. Their revenge would come, and it would come with a force unlike anything they had faced before. "Commander," Kara Miller said, her voice steady but concerned, "we've detected massive fleet movements. The Empire isn't done. They're massing ships at their core worlds, and they're coming for Earth. Their retaliation is already underway." Gray felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The news wasn't unexpected, but it was still a heavy blow. The Empire had lost the battle, but they were far from finished. They had resources, technology, and the sheer power of an entire galactic empire at their disposal. This would be a different kind of war, a war that Earth couldn't win on its own. We knew this would happen, Gray muttered, his hands gripping the edge of his console. But we weren't ready for this scale. Kara nodded, eyes focused on the tactical map. The Empire was assembling a fleet more massive than any Earth had ever seen, an armada that would dwarf their forces. It was clear the Empire was preparing for a counteroffensive that would put everything they had into taking Earth down for good. Commander, Kara continued, our fleet can hold the line for now. But we need more support. We can't face this alone. Gray took a deep breath, his mind working rapidly. He knew they were walking a razor's edge. The Star Destroyer was still Earth's most powerful weapon, but even it wouldn't be enough to stop the full force of the Empire's revenge. And the clock was ticking. The Imperial fleet was approaching fast. I'll contact the Council, Gray said, his voice tight. They need to know what we're up against. We need reinforcements, and we need them now. He turned to the comms officer, who quickly patched him into the emergency communications channel. The Council needed to act. They needed to unite, to mobilize every resource they had left. If they couldn't withstand the Empire's retaliation, everything they'd fought for, everything they'd sacrificed, would be in vain. The screen flickered to life as the Council's representatives appeared on the holographic display. Their faces were grave, eyes shadowed with worry. The news of the Empire's retaliation had spread quickly, and Earth's leaders were well aware of the dire situation. Commander Gray, the Council's leader, Director Lyle, began. We know the situation. The Empire's counterattack is coming. We've already begun mobilizing the fleet, but we need you to hold on for as long as you can. If Earth falls now, it will be the end of humanity's place in the galaxy. Gray nodded grimly, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. The enemy fleet was already moving. We don't have much time. The Empire's forces are moving faster than we anticipated. We'll need to outmaneuver them, or we'll be wiped out before reinforcements can arrive. Do you think you can hold them off? Director Lyle asked, his voice filled with the weight of the question. There was no time for false hope, only brutal honesty. Gray hesitated, his mind racing. They had just managed to break through the Empire's lines, but this was a different situation entirely. It wasn't just about surviving the next battle. It was about preventing the Empire from wiping out all of humanity in one swift blow. I don't know, Gray said quietly, but I'm not going down without a fight. Make sure you survive, Commander, Lyle replied. We'll be in touch. The transmission ended, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. The weight of the task ahead hung over the crew. Gray could feel the tension mounting. The Empire's response was imminent, and they didn't have the luxury of time. Every second that passed brought them closer to the Empire's arrival. All hands, prepare for battle, Gray ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. We're not just defending Earth now. We're defending everything humanity stands for. The crew moved quickly, springing into action as the Star Destroyer prepared for the inevitable assault. The Empire's fleet was on the move, but so was Earth's final weapon. Gray knew this wasn't going to be a simple battle. The Empire had already shown they were ruthless, and their vengeance would be like nothing Earth had seen. Minutes felt like hours as the Star Destroyer moved toward the expected battlefield. The weapons were ready, the shields primed, and the crew was as prepared as they could be. But no one could predict what would happen next. Gray knew one thing for certain. Earth's fate depended on how they fought this battle. If they could hold off the Empire's might long enough for reinforcements to arrive, they might stand a chance. But if not, a warning siren blared, snapping Gray out of his thoughts. The enemy fleet was almost upon them. Target acquired, Kara reported, her fingers flying over the controls. They're coming in fast. Heavy fire expected. Gray took one last glance at the view screen. The enemy fleet loomed closer, their ships like an endless tide of metal and fire. The battle ahead would determine everything. Braced for impact, Gray ordered, "This is it." The first barrage of enemy fire tore into the Star Destroyer, the ship shuddering violently under the weight of the blast. The crew held their ground, returning fire with every weapon they had. The battle was a blur, lasers and missiles flashing, shields flaring with each strike. The Empire's retaliation had begun, and there was no turning back now. Suspense hook, the battle has begun, and Earth's forces are under heavy attack. The Empire's wrath has been unleashed, but can the Star Destroyer withstand the onslaught long enough for reinforcements to arrive? The fate of humanity hangs in the balance. Can they survive the full force of the Empire's revenge? The Star Destroyer trembled violently as the Empire's fleet unleashed wave after wave of blistering fire. The immense shockwaves from the enemy's heavy artillery rattled the entire ship, threatening to tear it apart at the seams. Gray's mind was sharp, calculating each move with precision. Every second mattered, and every decision could be the difference between life and death for the crew and for humanity itself. Shields at 15%. We can't take much more of this. The tactical officer called out, his voice tinged with panic. Gray knew the Star Destroyer was taking a beating, but he wasn't about to let the ship fall now. Not when so much was at stake. The crew had already proven their courage. They had proven their worth. But now it was time to push back against the Empire with everything they had left. Redirect all power to shields. Get those weapons online. Gray shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. We need to break their formation, now. Kara Miller, standing at the tactical station, nodded quickly and began issuing commands. The crew of the Star Destroyer was a well-oiled machine. Battle-hardened, determined, and united in their cause. Even as their ship rocked under the onslaught, they held firm. "We've got them on the run, Commander," Kara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The Empire's fleet is losing cohesion. Their formation is starting to fragment." Gray's heart raced as he saw the first signs of hope. The Empire's forces, despite their overwhelming numbers, were beginning to falter. It was the opening they needed. If they could break the enemy's formation and take out their command ships, it might cripple their entire response. "Focus fire on their command vessels," Gray ordered. "If we take down their leadership, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." The crew of the Star Destroyer complied without hesitation. The massive guns of the ship unleashed a torrent of laser fire, pounding into the Empire's vulnerable command ships. The explosions that followed sent shockwaves through space, each blast signaling the death of another Imperial leader. Their ships began to scatter in a desperate attempt to regroup. But even as the Empire's forces lost their momentum, they weren't done yet. The largest Imperial warship, a flagship that dwarfed the Star Destroyer, came into view. It was a behemoth, a floating city of destruction that could wipe out entire fleets with a single shot. The Star Destroyer had taken out the smaller ships. But this would be the real test. Gray's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest of his command chair. This was the battle that would determine everything. If they couldn't bring down the flagship, the Empire's revenge would be total and brutal. "Sir," Kara's voice snapped him from his thoughts. "The flagship is charging up its superlaser. It's going to fire. Brace for impact." Gray shouted, throwing himself into action. "We need to disable that weapon now, or we're done for." The Star Destroyer surged forward, dodging the incoming fire from the remaining Imperial ships. Every movement had to be perfect. One wrong move, and they'd be vaporized in an instant. "Target the flagship's weapon systems," Gray ordered. "We need to hit them before they fire." The crew worked in perfect harmony, their coordinated efforts the only thing standing between Earth and annihilation. The Star Destroyer's guns fired relentlessly, hitting the flagship's superweapon just as it began to power up. The blasts shook the massive ship, causing the energy beam to misfire, missing its intended target by inches. Gray didn't give them a moment's rest. Full power to the forward guns. We have one shot at this. The Star Destroyer's forward cannons fired, and the powerful blasts ripped through the massive hull of the Imperial flagship. With a deafening roar, the flagship exploded, the shockwave sending debris scattering through the void. "We did it," Kara shouted in disbelief, her voice a mix of relief and triumph. But Gray's eyes never left the screen. The battle was far from over. The Empire's fleet still outnumbered them, and with the flagship destroyed, the Empire's remaining forces would be desperate. But this victory, this pivotal blow to the heart of the Empire, was enough to tip the scales. For now, the war was in humanity's favor. "All ships, concentrate fire on the remaining Imperial forces," Gray commanded. "They're leaderless and disorganized. We finish this now." The Star Destroyer unleashed its final barrage, and with it, the remaining Imperial ships began to crumble. The Empire's retaliation had faltered, their fleet shattered and leaderless. The vast armada that had once seemed unstoppable now lay in ruins, the debris of their once mighty ships drifting through space. Gray's chest tightened as the last Imperial ship exploded, sending ripples of energy through the battlefield. It was over. For now, Earth had won. The Empire had been dealt a blow that would not be forgotten. But Gray knew better than anyone. The Empire was not a foe to be underestimated. This victory had come at a great cost, and the fight was far from over. Earth had survived today, but the scars of war ran deep. "We've done it," Kara whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "We've won." Gray nodded, though his face remained grim. "We've won the battle, but the war is far from over." Suspense hook. Humanity has survived the Empire's retaliation, but the cost has been steep. The Star Destroyer has delivered a decisive blow, but will the Empire rise again? What comes next for Earth after this victory? The war is far from over.